we have with us Constantijn. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
You have the most interesting title of all of the sessions, which is "What do champion cyclists and tech founders have in common?" So
you thought up the title.
Did
so
I?
It's a compliment to you, I guess.
Actually, we're going to get to that in a bit, but I just wanted to congratulate you on the extension of Techleap. Can you tell us a little bit more about Techleap's mission and what's ahead for the organization?
Yeah, so formally it's not announced yet, so it's going to be end of the week. There was some kind of an announcement came out, but it's a much larger package. It's about what the government wants to do with tech and startups, and so what we have now is a Techleap going to be extended because it was a program of 4 years and then was supposed to stop, and then they said, well, there's still clearly a need for an organization like that, so they extended it, but with a much smaller budget, which is it's going to be a challenge, but it's a nice challenge to have because we can now also become much more entrepreneurial. So we're now also allowed to raise funds outside of the government,
right,
and which gives us much more freedom to operate. So and we will want to focus much more on on the community. Programs for founders, and create much more value as well for our key audience.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the programs you have in mind, or anything that could be really helpful to founders as they kind of take on this journey to scale their organizations?
So Techleap works mostly with scale-up founders, and we do have, for deep tech companies, we've also focused on a little earlier phase because many of the problems that they bump into are actually, they generated earlier on in the process. So we have a pole position program for that. We organize a competition called the Academic Startup Competition that's really around the deep tech space. And then, and there we also work with, for instance, with the universities to have standard term sheets, things, basically to make it easier for companies to be in a position to grow. But it's always about scaling. We're not in the startup in the early phases. It's always about trying to find either the problems or the accelerators to scale companies. So the other program we have is called the RISE program, which is typically for scale-up companies. And for them as well to, it's not, we look at product, look at financing, look at internationalization, those kind of things. And then we have a network of international entrepreneurs. We have people here in the room as well from Silicon Valley, and they, for those companies that want to go to the US, to have a network of Dutch entrepreneurs there, or people we call them with an orange heart that will help scale these companies in these other markets. That's another asset that we have. And then we also have something that's called the Connector, which is basically two curated communities of investors and deep tech founders to bring them together.
Great. So you've talked a little bit about what Techleap is doing. What do you think just the Netherlands as a whole needs to change in order to get more talent into the country?
Well, I think the Holland is actually quite an attractive place already. I think some of the migration rules are really good. Of course, we want much better option schemes. That's one of the things that people, foreign tech professionals expect to get shares in the company. So to have a much better fiscal regime for options is one of the most important things we can do there. The government is working on that, but we're not there yet. So I think that's really important. Then obviously, you need also culture, an inclusive culture, and that you can nurture at the ecosystem level. But that's also something that should be really a strategic focus of tech companies, that they set themselves up for scaling. So that means that if you have a completely white male Dutch-speaking company and culture, you're not set up for scaling. It's very likely that at the moment that you're really going to hit product market fit, that you won't find the people in the talent pools that you are addressing, and people don't want to work with you because you don't really kind of have the same culture that they want to be active in. So I think that's a really strategic point, and it's not stressed enough. So we're trying to do that. We're also creating a community of diverse leaders in tech, also to show that there are many people out there. There are very much bigger talent pools actually available that are currently not really tapped into.
Yeah. And you actually had that really interesting story you mentioned earlier when we spoke about Miro, and it's that there's 100. How many employees does Miro have?
Yeah, so I don't know where they are now. I mean, they used to have 900 employees. I think they scaled back a bit. I think they have something like 800, but maybe 900 employees in Amsterdam, of which only 100 are Dutch. So there's also a thing with how good are Dutch, our tech talent, and how ambitious is it. So there is I mean, Rotterdam, Amsterdam, are very attractive for foreign talent, and they come here and they want to work really hard. And then they're competing with domestic talent, and there's just a shortage of talent, but also the kind of talent that these companies are hiring. So I don't think there's a real problem with attracting foreign talent, because otherwise they wouldn't have their 800 foreigners in the office.
Right.
There is a bit of an issue if do we find enough quality domestic talent, and is our education system actually producing these?
Right. Yep. So a few weeks ago, you hosted an event and you asked a champion cyclist to attend. So this brings us back to why is the session titled what it is. Why did you ask them to attend a founders event?
Yeah, well, so this Annemieke van Vleuten, she's not just a cyclist. She's an amazing athlete. She only started cycling actually when she was, I think, 23 or 24. And she's 40 now, and she won the Vuelta basically 2 days before she was at our event. But we invited her because we wanted to look at two parallels, and I think there's a very strong parallel between a high-performing tech entrepreneur and an athlete. You have to build your team around you. You have to be physically fit. You have to be mentally fit. It's also what Annemieke does really well. She has a mental coach. She has a physical coach. She does our planning, and this is what you need to do. You need to know when you need to peak. You need to recover. You need to you go through very hard times. How do you deal with hardship? And so she had a really compelling story about basically when she actually the Vuelta, she knew she couldn't make it. She wasn't fit enough. She wasn't in her best form, but she was tactically really strong. And she had 1 minute, she could give away. And she actually 7 seconds. Within 7 seconds, she won the tour. But it was she knew that she was be at a point where she would want to give up.
Yeah.
But she had prepared that already. So she had kind of trained herself. What are the thoughts that I'm going to have when I come to the point that I want to give up? So when she had those thoughts, she started laughing, said, look, see, I predicted that I would think like this. And that gave her positive energy, and she kept on going. So I think she gave a lot of very practical tips to people how to deal with adversity. She fell off her bike during the World Championship, broke her elbow, then decided to continue because she thought that she could get her colleague the World Championship. And by coincidence, she became world champion herself. So really a remarkable person. And I think we should be looking more also at those kind of parallels because they think in top performance. If you are a top athlete, you have a very clear goal. You want to be Olympic champion. That's much clearer than if you're a company. Like, how big do you want to grow? You don't really know. I want to be in so many countries. What does that say?
Yeah.
But they know, and it helps them to be super specific about how they organize that path to that goal. And I think that's something. If if you can define where you want to go, it's also easier to find all the support, build your team towards that objective.
Yeah. And so, how do you manage your own personal? So you've told us about how an athlete manages their sort of like mental health and well-being. How do you manage your own personal mental health and well-being? Because you're also in a very high pressure position.
Well, no, I'm in less. No, if I stop my work, nothing really changes. So no, I mean,
I don't think so.
So be quite frankly about it. It's not like you're an engineer building a bridge, or there's not like if Max Verstappen stops, he has 800 people that are unemployed. So that's so it's a bit different, I would say. And also, if you're leading a company and you're a CEO, I'm kind of a chairman of an organization, but if I stop, the organization could go on. So I don't think it's that bad. But so what I do mentally, so I married a very, very strong woman, which is for me is amazing. We are very compatible, and we help each other out. So and also in our basically how we share time in home and how we deal with our duties. But she's very hardworking, and we kind of are at a strategic level. We can really help each other. I think it's important to be physically fit because it's important that if you lead, I don't basically lead a startup or something, but I kind of Techleap is a change agent. So you have to always kind of be telling the story about the change, and you know, if you are depressed, then your message is depressing, right? So you have to be fit, you have to be mentally ready, and the people have to see that you are leading, because we are going through quite a difficult time. You know, my organization was supposed to stop, so we had, for more than a year, people knew that this was going to end. So you're telling people, no, but we have to perform until the very end. We have to go. And then, yes, then your contracts are over and it's done. But we have to deliver till the last moment. And of course, we will try to make sure that there's going to be a longer runway, because we think there's a lot to be done. But it's continuously, you know, telling the story and keeping people motivated, which you need. I think as a leader, you need to put really attention to, and it requires you to be fit.
Yeah. We have some time for a few questions, if you don't mind, from the audience. Does anybody have a question? Yep. Oh, gosh, I can hear. I should just leave it with you, because you often have the first question.
I'll buy one.
Bring your own.
Bit of a tricky question, the one of mine. Now, when we talk about high performance in sport, we know that high performance in sport comes with a cost. That being health on the long run. We know the high performance in sport cannot be held forever, because obviously it's going to bring some damages to the body, etc., etc. So looking at high performance in sport and bringing that kind of mindset into the business environment, how dangerous can it be on the long run?
Well, I don't think. I think a lot of sports people are very fit and will stay fit, and you have to do, you know. But that's different. So I don't think there's a 100% parallel there. I do think that mental well-being is really important. People, you know, the startup rush, you know, everyday stress is on one hand addictive. On the other hand, it's really hard on people. And I think so. What Annemieke did is take a mental coach. I think she didn't need it because she had a mental problem. She needed it because she knew that she had to be 100%. So even she said, like, even stress with my husband is going to affect my performance as an athlete. So she said that's also something I need to manage. I think if you are an entrepreneur, you know you'll be under this stress. To have some person or other way to be able to offload some of that tension is, I think, really important. But it can also be with a number of founders. So we are organizing, for instance, groups of founders, and they will share their challenges, and that can be very technical, but it can also be very personal, and that's, I think, also a way that you can manage that. But you shouldn't drive yourself in the ground. That's obvious.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi. You talked briefly about the diverse leaders in tech. I was there as well, and the energy was quite promising. But for you, like, let's say a couple of weeks after the launch of that, what is your takeaway, and how do you think this will make a difference?
Yeah, so in first, a community has to be built by people, so it has to become a momentum. And so one of the things that were set up was were written up was a manifesto. So basically, a number of activities that we can start doing. This really is at the beginning. You know, this is not it's launched, but it's not even there. You know, the people in the room were the people that are going to carry it forward. So now the challenge will be to get a cadence of events, to start developing useful services, and also what we want to do is to collect much more data on diversity, but also help companies how you collect data so that you can start measuring it, and until you measure it, you can't really do anything about it. So there's a whole set of things we will start doing. And we have one of my team members is going to take charge of that community, and that's one of the things that we will actually have to spin out as well. So it will have a runway within Techleap for a year, and then will continue on its own if there's enough momentum within that community.
One more question.
Constantijn, we see a lot of things happening, obviously, in the tech domain. We had the fintech wave, we had now the tech also with quantum and biotech. But now you see also a lot of attention towards sustainability and impact. And that seems to be a little bit lagging behind, or the business model don't really add up in a way. Is there something that Techleap or we as a whole, as a community, can do in order to, let's say, improve that part? Not about the tree hugging, but really make more sustainable business models to move that forward. And can the Dutch, excel in that space?
Well, I don't know how you define it, but the green investments were the biggest investment category last year, over $1 billion invested. It's the only category that actually continued growing. So in terms of capital, much more capital is actually going into that space. You see that actually more broadly. So that's a positive thing. I don't know. It's not up to me to design a business model for an entrepreneur. I mean, if an entrepreneur can't design a business model that doesn't make sense, then this shouldn't be an entrepreneur, right? So, and I think you have enough incubators and accelerators and all these, but in the end, you have to have a real problem and a real solution and a real customer that wants to pay. It's that simple. So what I do see is that many people design something from a lab or some incredible solution, energy solution, all beautifully renewable, but never comes to a price point that it's competitive. So you need a government intervention to set a norm or forbid fossil fuels and those kind of things to make alternative business models work. And that's obviously very, very risky, because then you depend on the government, and the government may just be a year late with their legislation, and then your company is dead. So if you have a business model that depends on government intervention, then I think that's really, really tricky. So you have to find something that will earn you money and will be able to bridge towards the moment where you can go full scale in these kind of solutions. And another thing is, if you have a solution that requires a full redesign of your supply chain, then you either must have massive amounts of capital and incredible entrepreneurial skills, or just don't go there. It's a bit like with I wouldn't say Hyperloop, for instance, is one of those things. If there's no infrastructure, there's a lot of government involvement, so you need permits and all that. Then there's a very high capital cost to build it all. So if you're in that space, you have to have a huge time horizon, and you have to find investors that want to go along with this. Otherwise, you don't enter that space, this is of course a challenge, because if you got something that is so great, like the Hyperloop pod, it's incredible. If it would work, it would be brilliant, and you can't tell anybody not to go down that space. And I hope it's all going to work, but that's a very, very difficult business to be in. So, and Lightyear was another one. If you look at the Lightyear Squad, the small car, that's it's a very competitive car. It has a solar roof. It has it's lighter, and it's cheaper than a Biro. It has more functionalities than a Biro. A car like that could be super effective in the car. It's the same technology, but it's applied differently. So that if you compare the two, would you go for the one that is much cheaper to build and has a clear product market fit, versus the one that is competing with an existing industry where you have to outcompete industries that are completely optimized in their supply chain? That's super hard. And so if the companies that you work with, I think it's really important to have the very tough conversations. Do you want to do this? There's another electronic car which makes vintage car models, and they've done, I think they're working on it for 9 years or something, and they will probably be successful eventually, because people, for them to make a profit, they only need to sell 10 cars a year. That business model might work, and because it's a lifestyle business, so that's good for that entrepreneur. But I think that many of our accelerators and incubators are just much too friendly with the entrepreneurs in these kind of business, because the perspective is so wonderful. Isn't it wonderful if you can eradicate all combustion fuel engines? Yeah, it's brilliant. You would like that. Or if you can fly an electric plane, wonderful. But if you need 3, 5, 6 billion, And you know that in Germany that's the biggest market for that. There's no investor. That the pension funds will not invest in that. Then then why do you go in that space if you want a business? If you are a dreamer or you are an adventurer, then that's great. Go and adventure. Walk up the Mount Everest. Great, but it's going to be very hard. And if you don't have that conversation with the people in your portfolio and keep on just going, I think that you're not fair to the entrepreneurs either.
I think this is a really interesting topic, and we're going to be covering it quite a bit tomorrow, because tomorrow is actually Capital Day here at Upstream, and it's aimed at connecting investors and founders. And a lot of the fireside chats that are going to be happening tomorrow are going to be, exactly around this, like the tension of like when you're trying to build a high impact company, but you also have to have a proper business model, and how do you explore those? What are the right investors to take on? What are the ones to pass on for your business? So thank you for teeing that up for us tomorrow for Capital Day. We are nearing the end of this session, so I just want to thank you for your time. Do you have any parting words for the attendees today?
Yeah, I think it's always a bit of a risky position if you're in the program between the program and the bar. And so I know that you're all dying to get to the bar. I'm very grateful for the organization that they actually, I don't know if you stopped providing drinks, but often they continue providing drinks. Therefore, it's impossible to have a panel like this. Yeah. But so if we are going to the bar anyway, then don't forget to raise the bar. And I know this sounds a bit tacky, but it's really important, because we're doing really well in the Netherlands, but we're going all our way. But if you want to compete, and if everyone who's never been in Silicon Valley, just go there, or go to Tel Aviv, go and feel that kind of that urgency, that drive, and that's really what we need here too. We need to raise the bar, even though life is very comfortable here, and but out there it's sometimes really a different ball game, and there's just so much more capital, and there's just in these places talent of the whole world goes there because they want to compete and because they have nothing to lose, and they have an urgency that we just don't have. So let's raise the glass, raise the bar, and have a good time.
Thank you.